All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So, it is finally time to talk about the Thalys. The Thalys is the only Incarnon weapon I have not yet talked about, which is the reason to talk about it, unfortunately. The Thalys is, of course, our newest Incarnon that came with Isleweaver, and it is a melee weapon of all time. It is the heavy Scythe category of weapon, which has very, very few entrants, and I'm happy to report that within that lack of competition, this is by far the best one. With that, we're going to show off the build really quickly. Shock and surprise, it's an influence build. It's just the normal influence build. It's just the absolutely regular, the influence build is the build for the weapon. This is mostly due to this weapon just being a heavy scythe that has good stats. It's a heavy scythe that has solid status, good crit chance, good crit damage. Everything about it is just like good stuff, and then the Incarnon form just gives it more regular good stats. So the build is not anything crazy. Influence is still going to be the best thing that you're going to be doing with it. With that, though, of course, we are going to talk about the evolutions themselves, and starting with the main evolution, and the reason why this thing just kind of doesn't have a particular feel of its own, and that is because the evolution 1, whenever you transform this weapon, you get two things. One, you get +3 range, which is, of course, always great, and plus 40% attack speed, which is also always great. That is a prime mod, actually basically 2 prime mods worth of stats. And then in addition to that, you get attacks embedded, damaging shards in enemies. Now, how useful is that? The answer is basically not at all, but let's get through the other evolutions before we explain why that is. Second evolution, or our first real evolution, evolution 2, though. It's under 20% attack speed is my preference. You can get more attack speed with the slide, but that's pretty useless. And then this one is our other actually very real option, which is on status effect, gain 0.1 range for 8 seconds, which stacks 20 times. A couple extra meters of range is pretty good, but I prefer the additional speed, as we're already, I think, getting plenty of range from our first evolution, and of course, running Primed Reach, which ends up being more range than Dreadful Reach. So the 20% to go with this 40%. I think is better, so we don't have to run an attack speed mod. Then, on our Evolution 3, the one that I prefer is each enemy hit by a slide attack gives you +5 combo. This allows you to max out that combo pretty much instantaneously if there's any kind of a group that you're fighting, though it is super fair to get +1 combo count on shard damage, as also on groups this will speed things up, and it's very, very passive, as the weapon is just always going to be inflicting the shard damage. The big note on this is you don't get those shards until you're already evolved into its evolution. So, Nimble Scythe will help you get to the point where your Scythe is actually turned on. This needs your Scythe to already be turned on in order to benefit it, which is why I prefer the Nimble Scythe pretty extensively. The third one is just +20 initial combo, which is like kind of splitting the difference between the two. If you hit 4 enemies with a Nimble Scythe, then you're going to get that 20 combo in like a single attack. So I don't value this as much, but you could definitely go with this if you feel like it's of benefit to you. For our fourth evolution, this is kind of like standard stuff. We're just on 3x in order to transform into Incarnon form instead of needing to get to 6x. The other choices here, you get +100% jump and double jump height. I found this to actually be more awkward than beneficial, but it's worth trying out, and if you do like it, then this is a thing that you can stat stick for this effect. And then for our last one, we have ground finishers, knock enemies down in a 6-meter radius, which is, of course, totally useless. We're not doing that. For our final evolution, Evolution 5, this is where things get much more interesting, and we get to talk about some of the different features of this weapon. So, the one that I prefer is that shard duration is increased to 30 seconds. It's baseline 15. Shards become weak spots that have +100% crit chance when damaged. When damaged, the shard damage is reduced by -50%. So this basically reduces the damage that the shards themselves do whenever they tick damage. But it gives you a big crit bonus. An extra 30% crit is quite nice. This is my preference because the shards, plain and simple, just they don't do very much damage. They scale very poorly. They are a little bit of extra damage. They don't really get, they don't have statuses, basically, and they are just pretty poor overall. So just getting a crit chance buff out of hitting enemies and having a shard on them that you can get more crit on is, I think, the best thing you can be doing. You can try Chain Shatter, which is that using your heavy attacks, which is specifically good with Tennokai, will pop the shards, and then it can cause like a chain reaction that like blows all the enemies up or whatever. In theory, but again, it just doesn't do that much damage, and so is not very useful. The heavy attack, like Chain Shatter, does have like better scaling than the regular shard stuff, but not better to the point where I think it's actually particularly useful. And then finally, Explosive Growth is what I would like to pick, but this is unfortunately very buggy. This is that shards grow whenever a new shard is created up to 3 times. Fully grown shards erupt from the embedded enemy, dealing ×2 damage and impaling them on the spot. Now, that last part there is a little bit of additional crowd control, which could be useful whenever you're running into like very high-level enemies. Just getting them to just sit still and be killed by your big Scythe would actually be really useful if you're running into like very high-level guys or like some particular interactions. Say, for example, if you're running into attenuated enemies, just stunning them and just like keeping them in place while they slowly die over time, just how attenuation enemies are. All that stuff would be very useful. This doesn't work. This doesn't stun the enemies. So because it doesn't work, I'm not going to use it. If that gets fixed, then I think it's a very reasonable choice over Void Splinters, because the additional crit chance is really not necessary at pretty much any level of play. And the crowd control can be useful against, certain situations where, there's just a enemy sitting around that has attenuation that'll die over time, and they can't be shooting at you if they're stunned in theory, if it actually functions. And that's what's kind of going on with the evolutions here. So basically, it's a very well-statted heavy Scythe that has no problems clearing content, but its unique thing, it kind of doesn't work very well. The big problem here is that the shards, you hit an enemy to put a shard on them, and then you hit other enemies to like make the shard tick a little bit of damage. But like we're trying to kill the enemies in like 2 swings. So like this like 15 seconds of like damage over time stuff, like if the enemy is alive for 15 seconds, they probably have attenuation, and the additional damage is completely meaningless. So all that stuff is just kind of moot in the current way that Warframe is played. So we're just in a situation where it is just a good weapon. If you like heavy scythes, like I do, I think that this like move set for heavy scythes is a pretty fun one. Like it's just like a fun weapon to swing around and do stuff with, then great. And you can see that like in terms of building up combo, we can spin real fast and just like get it evolved real quickly, and then influence goes crazy. We get a bunch of range. Its heavy attacks do solid damage, builds up Tennokai quite quickly, and it's good stuff. Like, in terms of its just performance as a weapon, I have few and no complaints, really. Like, it does exactly what I want a weapon to do. Heavies clear heavy enemies. Basic attacks clear groups of dudes through influence procs and just, like, the generally good range that this weapon has. It has good forward momentum on its E, and, like, the overwhelming stats make up for the fact that the stance for heavy sides is pretty poor in terms of overall multipliers. So it's definitely not a bad weapon. It's just that its gimmick is, like, pretty underused. You're not getting a lot out of it. It just kind of is doing it, and whether you see benefit from it or not, the weapon is already good enough, so it hardly matters. But yeah, that's the Thalys. Sorry it took me so long to get to this one. Yeah, that's what's up. It's the final Incarnon. Every other Incarnon has all its builds updated and everything on the site and such, as it were, which you can check. I'll make sure and link that down below if you want to get that updated list, but I'll see you tomorrow. So ends today's video. Thanks so much to all of the patrons for supporting not only this channel, but also the new Soulframe Scholar channel. It is much appreciated as that channel gets started. And thanks very much to our $10 patrons, Atheon, Scythe, Albern Drake, Alex Parnham, Arbiter Daydream, Babyhoot, Arcus, Nuven, Automatic, Brutus Salazar, Canolathra, Bob World, Colleen Smith, Dylan Dworsky, Athrain, James Hawthorne, GC4 Science, Josh, Lord Ian, Luzanth, Mike Easman, Mikkel, Mitchta, Nerve, Ruby, S267, Sanyu, Cezon, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Waldetto1, Seraphir, and Zero Weebs Plan, and of course all of the $5 and $2 patrons as well. Your support is very much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.